finally I was like, hold on, time out. I'm now seeing the pattern. Like the running of this park, the operating of this property and this facility is not about my vision. My purpose here is, what is your vision and how do we enact that? How do we move forward with the things that, quite honestly, before I ever got here, we should have been doing because it was the things that you felt passionately about, and how can I support that?
Tap into innovation at IAAPA Expo, the biggest industry event of the year.
Join us and other attraction pros in Orlando, Florida, November 18th to the 22nd to engage with the global community.
Learn from the experts, leave with new ideas, and turn your passion for the industry into new possibilities.
Register now using the link in the show notes to save up to 30%.
Welcome to the Attraction Pros podcast, where we discuss the latest trends and challenges facing the attractions industry today.
We chat with some of the top leaders in the field and provide resources that will help develop your career in this great industry.
I am Josh Liebman. I am obsessed with the guest experience and helping attractions make that their top priority for success.
And I'm Matt Heller. I am passionate about organizational effectiveness, leadership development, and employee engagement.
Now sit upright, hold on tight, and get ready for the Attraction Pros podcast. Hey, Matt, how's it going?
It's going fantastically today. Josh, how are you?
I'm doing great. Question for you.
Yeah.
Do you prefer hard, crunchy, small snack pretzels or big, soft pretzels?
Oh my goodness. Can I say both? Can I say it depends?
Okay, I didn't realize the question was so complicated, but okay, yeah.
Well, just
you're a deep man.
When it comes to snack food, yes. There are times when I would love a soft pretzel with some mustard on it. Maybe I'm drinking some beer, that kind of thing. It pairs very nicely. But then other times when I just might be snacking and, watching a movie or watching some TV or something, and, a couple of nice crunchy pretzels with, a glass of ice water would be perfect. So I guess it kind of depends to me.
So when you have the big pretzel, you like to have it with a beer. When you have the small crunchy pretzels, you like to have it with water. So you're saying, regardless, when you're eating pretzels, you would say, these pretzels are making me thirsty.
We went there. You went there. That's nice. Yes.
I wasn't expecting to go there, but we went there.
Yes. I love it. I love it.
Seinfeld reference for those of you who are like, what's going on? Anyway.
Exactly.
We're going to Pennsylvania today on the podcast.
Yeah. Sure. We're going to Lancaster?
Lancaster.
Did I say it right? Lancaster.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Have you been to Lancaster?
Well, I've been to Dutch Wonderland a couple times, so I guess, yes, I have.
Okay. I've been to Lancaster. I have not had the opportunity yet to go to Dutch Wonderland, but we get to talk to Megan Hartman today. She is Dutch Wonderland's general manager. She's been there since January of 2024.
She's got an extensive career in the attractions industry, and not only is she overseeing Dutch Wonderland, but we also get to hear how her leadership is now over the Cartoon Network Hotel and also the Old Mill Stream Campground, and how those things, you think about leadership and it's got to all be the same, but it's really not. And so it's really interesting to hear her philosophies on those different entities.
She also talks about how the strategy is different for leading employees versus leading guests when it comes to all the different properties. And as people who talk about the intersection of the guest and employee experience so much, it's just great to hear her philosophy. She did begin her career as a lifeguard, and we get to talk about how that mindset, that lens really stays with her no matter what she is looking at the park, and how that influences literally how she sees everything, whether she's at the park or whether she's out and about wherever else too.
And she also talks about being comfortable with the uncomfortable. And I can't think of many more positions in the world than a leader where you're going to be uncomfortable. And there's a lot of opportunities for you to get comfortable with being uncomfortable and putting your trust in other people. So would you say it's time to get to this interview with Megan?
Let's do it. Grab your pretzels.
Hey, Megan, welcome to the Attraction Pros podcast. How you doing today?
Good. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So excited to jump into this conversation. Can you start us off by telling us a little little bit about yourself and your career to this point.
Absolutely. So I am currently the general manager of Dutch Wonderland, Dutch Wonderland Resort. So we also have a campground and Cartoon Network hotel. But I started my career at Paramount Kings Island back in 2004 as a lifeguard. The only reason I started as a lifeguard, or at least the primary motivation, was I didn't want to push a button. And then I fell in love with this industry and have been in it for over 20 years now. So I stayed with Kings Island through the purchase from Cedar Fair, now Six Flags. And then in 2011, I joined Great Wolf. I just crossed the parking lot because Great Wolf had built right next to Kings Island, and I started with them, and then moved to North Carolina and continued my career with Great Wolf until 2020, when I went to Splish on Long Island and was the director of operations and then the AGM, working with the Mike Bankston, for those in the know. Learned a lot from him, and then had the opportunity to get back into the amusement park side of things and leave the water parks behind and join Dutch Wonderland.
Excellent. And then just curious, for those who maybe haven't visited or aren't familiar with Dutch Wonderland, can you give us a quick overview?
So it is in the middle of Amish country. That's hence the Dutch of Dutch Wonderland. So it's in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. We actually opened in 1963. We were originally family owned and then briefly owned by Hershey Park. And then they sold to Palace Entertainment. So joining that family of parks. But we are a family park. We are designed for children. So really our target demographic is 0 until about 10. We do have some larger attractions that more often than not become children's first coasters. Actually, my niece is coming to visit this weekend. She's 10 months old, so this will be her first park. So very, very excited for that. And then we have the campground, which is perfect for families who are looking for an easy getaway. They can bring their camper, they can stay in one of our cabins, or tent camp for those that like to do that. I'm not one that likes to do that, but there are plenty that do. And it's walking distance to the park. And then we also have Cartoon Network Hotel that is a little bit of an older demographic. So it goes up until kind of the teens with that IP, but it's still a great place for people to stay and then come over here and play. So we have quite a bit of room here on the stretch. We have, there's a mall across the street, there's hotels all over the place. There's a lot to do here. A lot of it is focused around the Amish, or is focused around farms, or focused on really kind of a simpler way of life, or a slower way of life. So it's a little bit different to be an amusement park in the middle of all of that, but I think we have matched the feel and the aesthetic in terms of it's easy to come here for our guests. It's easy to keep track of your kids and still have that relaxed feel while getting to experience that first park.
So Megan, your last park before this was New York, and now you're saying you're in kind of a slower, easier,
yes,
kind of place to live. What's that transition been like for you?
It's been an adjustment, a lovely adjustment. But that being said, we do pull from various locations, and New York and Long Island is one of them. We pull a lot of families from Philly, from DC. Actually, when I was talking about making the move to come here, everyone on Long Island, everyone from Splish that I was talking to, had been to this park, knew this park, and since I wasn't a native Long Islander, I had no idea what they were talking about, but they all had fond memories of it. But it is definitely a slower approach. But when the New Yorkers show up, I'm like, oh, don't worry. I know how to speak their language. It's good. I know these folks. But it is definitely a more relaxed approach from our guests. It's a slower approach. The New Yorkers definitely still walk faster in the park.
So you got to Lancaster in January of 2024. So you've told us a little bit about the adjustment. Can you tell us a little bit more about what the year has been like? What have been some of maybe the initial initiatives? You joined in the off season, so probably gearing up for the 2024 season, and then maybe walk us through kind of what the calendar year has been like so far.
Sure. So yeah, joined in January. Actually, I had my first day. It was in the pouring down rain. So I toured the park for the first time I had ever seen it, in the pouring down rain, and met the team. And then unfortunately, I very quickly had to leave to go to the International Aquatic Safety School because I'd already committed to being on faculty for Ellis and Associates for that event. So it was a very quick, hi, nice to meet you, bye moment. But I do think that was better for the team, for them to have a moment, to have some time to process and, okay, so this is who this person is. They can have their feelings about it. And then I came back, and we hit the ground running. We were actually the first park in the company to open. We have a Easter event, a spring event that we put on. So we opened the weekend before Easter. So very, very busy, just trying to get all of the attractions inspected, which, having come from the water park side of things, or at least that had been predominantly where I had been for most of my career, getting back into what it is to take apart and then put together a coaster after all of the testing, and having those things ready to go, or putting on a major event with decorations throughout the park. And they're talking about, where are we going to put up the flower wall, and I'm trying to figure out where in the park they're talking about. So it was definitely a whirlwind. But I am very fortunate for the team that was here. Our director of operations has been here for over 20 years. She's actually now our assistant general manager. Our director of maintenance has been here for over 20 years. So there's a wealth of knowledge and so much passion. So they were more than happy to explain and to teach and to show. But by the time I'd gotten my feet underneath me for the spring event, then we were transitioning into summer and opening our water park, and then moving into where we are now with our Happy Hauntings event. We actually, again, the earliest one we've ever done. We started our Happy Hauntings event last weekend. So getting corn stalks up and hay bales in, and we have a dive show, which is also not super common anymore within the parks. So seeing how that is set up and the different practices for that, and coming from the aquatic side of things, trying to not have a small heart attack every time they're going off of the high dive platform. But it's just been a lot of learning and a lot of asking questions and trusting the team. And really, it's, if I have a suggestion or having input, asking in a way that they either explain and give me a look of, like, you're a little bit crazy, but okay. But they fortunately have a very, very good, strong team here.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, and Megan, you mentioned, your strong aquatics background, and certainly, going to be an instructor at Ellis is a part of that. And I'm curious, from those early days, even as being a lifeguard, because you didn't want to push a button, what sort of lessons have you taken from that experience, now to being the general manager of an entire property and multiple properties, right? Because you've got the campground and the hotel as well.
So being a lifeguard is all about being observant, right? It's looking for the thing that is different or isn't normal, or watching for human behavior. So really, when you train a lifeguard, when you train someone to do that, you set them up for a lot of different opportunities, whether it's they go on for a career in the medical field or something in business, or ending up here in the industry for forever. So I think it's more just being able to work with people, being able to read people, whether it's understanding what the guests are looking for and what they want, or just, would I have appreciated this as a first year frontline lifeguard? Would that have been helpful and beneficial to me? If the answer is no, then we need to change that approach, or listening and getting that feedback from our team, because even though it's something I may not have wanted or would have wanted, that's not true for every person. So I think that power of observation is a huge component of it. There's always the safety aspect, of course, there's the risk evaluation, and I think that plays into anything we do as well, whether it's we want to prevent a trip and fall, or okay, what is the risk with this promotion that we're running? Or are we not putting ourselves out there enough in terms of marketing? How do we put ourselves out there more without, you know, taking away from another market? So I think it just comes down to people. It comes down to people, and it comes down to giving them what they want and really just taking care of them. Everybody's coming here for a good time, but how do we make them have fun, have a good time, while also having that feeling of being safe?
I'm curious if that trait of a lifeguard of always observing or always maybe looking for something that may be out of place, is that something that always stays with you? For instance, if you're walking through the park nowadays, whether it is or is not a life critical situation, do those gears still turn of here's this trash can that's out of place, or here's, you know, something that you're now seeing through the lens of a lifeguard that you learned from that time that has, you know, a completely different application?
It's awful and you cannot turn it off. So, for example, yesterday we were walking through the park, completely different conversation. We were talking about an interview for a new finance person here at the park. And while we're talking to her, I stop in the middle of the pathway and somebody had dropped a tablet off of their cart while they were doing their inspections. So I'm like crawling through the bushes to get this tablet. And they're like, how did you even see that there? And it's you. If there's something different, if there is something that's not quite right, or this seems odd, you lock in on it and it's hard to pull away from that, which is both good and bad. I'm also very easily distracted. So, for example, for this conversation, my phone is on the other side of the room. I took my watch off, so there's no possibility for that. But yes, you do tend to notice the little things, or even just trash in the park, picking it up, and there'll be people on the team saying, how did you see that? I'm like, how did anyone miss it? So I wish it only stayed at work. I wish it wasn't something that I did everywhere I go, but it never really leaves you.
And you're probably somebody who picks up trash like you said, everywhere, like the mall or the movie theater or grocery store or wherever. Like you're that person as well.
Yes, that person, and then also the person that will, and I don't do it as much anymore, but will tell kids to please walk if I'm somewhere and they're running, or, you know, the guest service smile. So, you know, acknowledging people and looking them in the eye and smiling at them. And then I'm realizing I'm at the grocery store. I'm not at work. I'm not wearing my name tag. No one knows why I'm doing this. So fortunately in Pennsylvania, that is more of the approach. In New York, it probably looked like I was going to try and kidnap someone. I don't know, but yeah, that's another thing that just doesn't go away.
Yeah. I remember I was in Disneyland one time with some friends who, you know, didn't know that much about parks. And I would just happen to be walking through a certain area and there was these kids running and it was just like a switch. I was like, walk, please. And like, I was not a team member or a cast member at Disneyland. And they still, this was 30 years ago, maybe, and they still, you know, bring that back up. Like they joke about how that just came out so naturally.
Oh yeah, it's ingrained at this point.
Yeah.
I have a question going back to one of the things you said. You said you got to Dutch Wonderland in January. You had a quick opportunity to say hello to everybody and then headed to the LS conference, which I said it was good for the team to be able to kind of give that time to adjust a little bit. Can you expand on that a little?
So there was a quick transition for me to join this team here, and between when my predecessor left and when I joined. So, you know, I personally have not gone through a transition in that way when who you're reporting to changes that fast. And you know, whether good, bad, otherwise, you have a relationship with that leader. You have a relationship with the person that you're working with. So I think in order for the team to be able to process that, they needed some time without me here in order to figure out how they felt about it and to make that transition and to figure out, okay, well, we no longer have this leader. We now have this essential stranger. So, you know, giving them time to figure out how they felt about that, giving them time to figure out, okay, well, we had a clear, defined plan to move forward. Now, what is that going to look like? So, I mean, we had to do that together when I came back, but I think the time without me here gave them time to process and have their real feelings where they're not worried about hurting me or upsetting me, or, oh, we're saying, well, this is what so and so did. It's not as a slight against me, and then them having to be concerned about whether or not I'm going to hold that against them. I think that transition time is crucial and is critical. Unfortunately, they got it no matter whether they wanted it or not. But I do think it was beneficial.
That's so interesting. And I think there's a lot of times when the team doesn't get that process time, like you called it, which I think is the perfect label for it. And, it's here we are, I'm the new GM, and these are my new initiatives. And you don't have that time to kind of let it settle in, like you said, good, bad, or otherwise. Now you're almost, taking away from the other person that was there and saying, okay, now we've got to make this switch. And I don't know you from, a hole in the wall. And so what kind of processing time do I have, unless there is actual time to do that and allow them to kind of let it sink in. So I think that's really interesting. I wonder if there's, kind of a lesson in there, even for people taking over a new position, to maybe not start like a new initiative right away and just kind of let things, I mean, I know we all have deadlines and we move in a quick environment, but, let things settle a little bit.
Well, and it was interesting, after that time away, I sat down, I set up one-on-ones with everyone on the team, and it took until about the third person for me to realize what was happening. But every single person had said, we knew what my predecessor's vision was. They're like, now we have to figure out what your vision is. And I was like, okay. And I didn't answer it because, again, in that one-on-one, it was more about them and getting to know them. And finally, I was like, hold on, time out. I'm now seeing the pattern. Like, the running of this park, the operating of this property and this facility is not about my vision. My purpose here is, what is your vision, and how do we enact that? How do we move forward with the things that, quite honestly, before I ever got here, we should have been doing because it was the things that you felt passionately about, and how can I support that? So I think it was just also a different mindset, but I didn't realize it was a different mindset until the third person in. So then I had to go back to the other folks and say, okay, time out. Like, what's your vision? Because my vision's irrelevant. We need to combine them. I will jump onto your bandwagon and help get it to where it needs to go.
How can leaders really embrace that mentality? Because when you start to pick up that pattern of now multiple people are saying, we want to know what your vision is, I feel like the default for many leaders would be, well, I need to have my vision. They're waiting for me. I'm the visionary here, where you really take this opposite approach of putting it back into their hands. So I'm curious if you can maybe talk about kind of the mindset shift, or really being able to have that mentality of saying, it's not about me, it's about you.
So there's so much good advice I've received over my career, but one of the things that Nick Lancaster, who I've been fortunate enough to work with and then be friends with for over 15 years now, had taught me and told me the smartest people I know admit that they know nothing. And it was very easy to do coming into this property and meeting this group of people, because quite frankly, I knew nothing in terms of this property. So just admitting and being comfortable in I'm going to let you be the expert. I will ask questions. I will have opinions. I will have recommendations, but they are the expert in their field. If we are good, and at least this is my philosophy, we're good at what we do, we get the right people in the right place and let them do their thing. Let them do what they're good at and what they're passionate about and what they excel in, and just support them in getting there. I think my role is more balancing all of these experts in their field and getting them to work together. So, how do we get marketing to, have the same vision as entertainment? How do we get operations to work, cohesively with maintenance, and just making sure that we're sharing all of those plans and working them together. But I think honestly, to answer your question, I'm comfortable in the not knowing. Don't get me wrong, I'm very type A. I love to be in control of things. I love things to be a certain way. But if you have people who are passionate and who care and have their vision, you can combine those visions. You can make them a shared goal because it's all centered around taking care of our people. It's all centered around taking care of our guests. And if that's the focus, everything will fall into place.
Well, you may have answered this question a little bit already, but I really was curious about, you talked about learning so much, coming into this role and into this new property. What have, I guess, some of those learnings been, or maybe has there been anything that surprised you, or you weren't anticipating learning, now taking in this role where you have so much, a different level of responsibility?
I have done way more on the financial side of things than I ever thought that I would or ever care to again. If you want me to be quite honest, we're actually just now hiring a new finance role. So very, very excited about that additional support. But no, nothing was too shocking because I have had fantastic leaders in my past that have been very open and very helpful in that training process. So I went into it with pretty much eyes wide open. I think there's more direction that you receive from corporate than you really thought, or you receive from ownership. And okay, we have this plan, and then suddenly things are changed here. So then we kind of refocus said plan. But nothing is too wild or too different than what I was expecting. Other than the basement at the hotel, no one told me that it needs as much work as it needs. But that they also left out until my first day on property. They're like, oh, by the way, let me show you this. But it's just another area for opportunity. It's just another area that we could invest in and do so much with.
So, Megan, you mentioned earlier that Dutch Wonderland is truly a family park. And most recently, at the time of this recording, just in the last couple of weeks, that was once again solidified by the Golden Ticket Awards of winning Best Family Park for the 5th time. Curious if you can talk about maybe what goes into that and maybe even the challenges or opportunities that come with that recognition.
So there's not too much in terms of a challenge that comes with it, other than you just feel like you need to up the ante for the next year or do even better for the next year. It's not something where you're in competition with really anyone else or any other park. It's just how do we then improve and continue that legacy and continue that experience. It's a lot of guests don't know about that. We do have it in the park, but it's something that they don't truly understand. But then when you have the conversation or they ask about that yellow ticket, that sign that's on that pathway, you see them making that connection and that click. And then they do get really excited of, oh, well, I've been to the world's best family park now. But honestly, it's just a really cool honor to be recognized. There are a ton of incredible parks. There are a ton of parks that do like the children's areas really well. But I think what's unique is that's the whole park. That's the whole experience. It's not, oh, okay, well, once we cross this threshold, it's going to be really intimidating for kids. It's the entire experience. So fortunately, I was there for a small portion of the celebration for the golden tickets. And then unfortunately, I had to leave early because my partner and I both came down with COVID and we did not want to share it with everybody else. So we missed the acceptance night. But one of our team from our marketing team accepted the word on our behalf. But it's definitely something that the recognition for our team is the biggest part. Knowing that our maintenance folks who have been here for most of their careers or have worked here for 20 plus years, them knowing that someone saw their effort and that someone appreciated their effort and took the time to recognize it, that's the biggest perk of it. That's the biggest draw. I mean, it's great in terms of marketing. It's great to tell the guests, but the best part of it is sharing that with our people and telling them that people see what they're doing and acknowledge what they're doing.
Yeah, I would imagine that especially the folks that, like you said, have been there for a long time and probably have been there for all of the awards that Dutch Wonderland has won, that really is something special for them. So how does that kind of, or maybe the question is, how do you notice that it impacts them? Like, are they standing a little taller? Are they, speaking with a little more confidence? Like, how do you recognize that?
Um, so I don't think it's even the standing a little bit taller, but it's just they continue to go and do the extra steps and do the extra things. A lot of places I work maintenance, they're the grumpy guys, and they don't want to do that project. And okay, well, I think that's silly, and they're usually not the most gung ho about decorating or hanging lights for the events. But today, just out of his own creativity and out of his own ownership of that attraction, we ran into one of the guys out in the park, and he had made these ghosts that light up and make noise just out of things that he had found in the shop. And he's like, well, I think kids would really like it if this was on this pathway. And he was there, just nobody asked him to, but he thought it was going to make it special. So he took the time to make that investment. And that doesn't come from nowhere. And if you think that people aren't recognizing it, you stop doing things like that. So the fact that they continue to make those little tweaks, little changes to put a little bit of themselves into this park, that I think that's where it shows that they are willing to still make those efforts and still to find something different and make it a little magical.
Mhm. So in addition to the park, you mentioned the hotels earlier, the Cartoon Network Hotel and the Old Mill Stream Campground.
Mhm.
You mentioned your personal preference of hotels versus campgrounds, but curious as far as really from a leadership standpoint, is there an approach to leading, between the park, the hotel, and the campground, or from a leadership standpoint, is it one cohesive job, I guess?
So for me as a leader, I think that doesn't change, but I think in terms of taking care of the people in the way that they want to be taken care of, you have to be able to adjust and flex there, or even in terms of our guests and our clientele and their expectations for each of the three different areas. For the campgrounds, I have learned to stay out of his way. He understands those campers in a way that I never will, but their expectations are, still high. They want to have a good time. They want clean bathroom facilities. They want strong Wi-Fi connection. But they have a sense of community that I did not anticipate or expect until I started working there, from the people that run the campground to the campers that come every single year. They want the same site. They stay next to their neighbors and friends and share stories. Unfortunately, we've had several personal medical emergencies or personal events happening at the campground, and their sense of community is one that is just astounding, because while our team is helping take care of those guests, other campers are helping take care of other campers, and it's just something I did not see coming. So trying to make myself available to them to become part of that family, while also understanding that most of the time they don't need me, is different. It's really just really inspiring to see. The hotel, in terms of guest expectations, I will say this: when I left Great Wolf, I was like, great, the guests go home at the end of the night. We don't have to worry about these anymore. And here we are right back in it, where the expectations for a pool, that's okay, I want to be able to go splash, play, be safe, and play in the pool. But the expectations, once you get into a room where you're putting your head on that pillow and that is your space, that's your home for the night, the expectations for cleanliness are far higher. The expectations for comfort are much higher. You have no problem sitting on a hard bench in an amusement park because it's for a short period of time, but you want that comfort. You want that home away from home in a hotel setting. So in terms of our people and taking care of our team members, not wildly different, but in terms of taking care of our guests, it is a very, very different mindset.
And Megan, would you also find, I know you talked about the New Yorkers coming in, but a different mindset because you mentioned that the park is really for families and small kids, right? So you don't have the big thrill rides and that type of thing. So would you also find that there's a slightly different mindset within the park than, at a specific water park or, again, a big thrill park or that kind of thing?
It's lines that comes to mind. So people will say like, "Oh, the lines were kind of long today." And I'm like, "Well, the attendance wasn't that high, but like a long line for a little kid and a long line for an adult are two very different wait times." So focusing on getting them through and getting them to as many different things as possible, but also having offerings outside of the attractions. Splish Splash, it was predominantly wait and ride for the slide, or you go into the wave pool, or you're getting food. There wasn't a great deal of entertainment or characters, or the shows. That just wasn't really what people were looking for. Here, you need a break from the lines. You need a break from the attractions. Kids need a place where they can decompress or just get some energy out. So we also have places where you can just dig in the sand. And it amazes me. We have this giant, beautiful coaster, and they would rather just dig in the sand. Yes, it's a little bit different.
It is funny you mentioned that. About a month or so ago, my wife and I, we took our two kids to the zoo, and our son is 3.5 years old, and our daughter she'll be 4 months old. So she's an infant. So she was just in the stroller the whole time. But yeah, in between animal exhibits and after the shows, my son saw a playground and he darted to it. And I was like, this is just like the playground that we have so close to our house, yet this is in a gated, ticketed facility. But you make a good point. If they need that, when you're going from whether in the zoo exhibit to show, or from ride to experience, you need that point to kind of decompress. I also think it's fascinating what you mentioned about the lines at the beginning, that it's not necessarily the wait time itself, but it's the perception of that wait time, that'll vary from adult to child, and that'll just vary from person to person based off of their own previous habits or previous experiences. If they're coming from New York, maybe they expect longer wait times in their life for everything else than someone who's coming more locally. So I think that's it's interesting because you're not just managing the efficiency of the operation, but also the perception of it too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Talking to our season pass holders, they'll say like, "Oh, we're not coming in August. We know that that's when all the tourists are here. So the lines are really long." And then I'm walking around in August going, it's 2 ride cycles and you're on the ride. That's not a long wait time. But when it's what you're used to or what your expectations are, it all varies.
Yeah. Well, Megan, earlier Josh had asked you to kind of talk through the experience at Dutch Wonderland. And one thing that wasn't mentioned yet, but we have to mention is, I don't know if it's the world's largest pretzel structure. I don't know, but it's a very popular photo spot there in Dutch Wonderland. For those who have not been or not an annual pass holder and don't know the kind of the history of the background, can you talk to us a little bit about that pretzel?
Sure. So, like I said, we are in Amish country, and then there's a lot of Pennsylvania Dutch in this area, which is where the Dutch of Dutch Wonderland comes from. So the pretzels, and we are not the largest pretzel. We are easily put to shame by it, but it's a nice kid-friendly version, and it's a great place for a picture. Although we do plant beautiful flowers around it every spring, and then they're trampled, and then we put something else up and it's trampled. Anytime you put something up, kids are going to trample it. But the pretzels, it's actually Pennsylvania produces 80% of the country's pretzels. So there's a large factory where they're produced here in York, which is about 30 minutes away. But it's a snack that started with the German speaking in Europe, and then they brought them over here because it was easy to do, it was easy to produce, and then you could easily mass produce them here. So we also have a delicious soft pretzel at our Penley's pub. It's fantastic. I cannot recommend it enough. But it's a acknowledgement, it's a nod to all of the production that's done here in this state.
Now, is that the Pennsylvania produces 80% of the country's pretzels? in total, or is that like large soft pretzels versus like bag crunchy pretzels? Or is this way too granular of a question?
I think I don't know. I think in term it's like Snyder's Pretzels is here in Pennsylvania. So I think it's pretzels overall. But then there's, also in another part of Pennsylvania, they say that it were like the snack food leading producer because of the Utz brand that is here. So I don't know. I think it's probably a little bit of branding from the various things in our area, but from what they tell me, it's just 80% of pretzels. No clarification on what kind of pretzels.
Yes, for further research needed, perhaps.
Yes.
I think I need to like fact check this later.
the pretzel lobby has claimed Pennsylvania.
Yes, I promise I do not own stock in any type of pretzels.
So awesome. That's so awesome. Megan, one of the things you talked about earlier that you kind of touched on a little bit was your kind of leadership philosophy. And I'm curious if you can go a little deeper into that and maybe how that has changed over the years, or maybe there's been sort of a North Star that's kind of kept you going on the same path.
Oh gosh, I hope I've grown and changed over the years as a leader, because let me tell you, there have been plenty of times that I've gotten it wrong. I started as a supervisor, as a leader at 18, and made plenty of mistakes. And I think a large portion of those mistakes came from I thought I had to be the one with the answer, or this is what we're doing and here's how we're going to do it, everybody get on board. Or I had a very black and white approach to things earlier in my career, and I think some of that just comes from the side of lifeguarding that makes it a challenge, because you're either following the rules or you're not, right? Or you're either performing the skill correctly or you're not. But one of my mentors used to usually yell out his office door as I was walking away, grumpy about whatever he had just told me to do. Would always say, "See the gray, Hartman," as I was walking away, and seeing like there is a different approach, there is a different way. Like it doesn't have to be black and white. I mean, yes, we still have to keep people safe. We still have to do the right thing. We still, operate with integrity. But there's so many different ways of getting to that, and to accommodate others, and to adjust for somebody else's vision or plan to get to that same goal. So I think I have become more flexible in that approach, and kind of what I was saying earlier, more comfortable in not being the one with the answer. Now, that I think part of this role and part of this title, you are the one that's ultimately responsible for it, but I trust my people enough that they're going to make the right decision, that I have no problem backing it up. And if they get it wrong, then we got it wrong. It's not them out on an island, but we want to give them credit where they do something that's great and celebrate them for that. And if they make a mistake, which we all do, shelter them from that and protect them and make them feel safe to try it again and potentially fail again, because we will. And you need to be able to have that safe space and have that opportunity. So I hope I've grown. I think sometimes I get it more right than I would have back in the day. But I think it's being willing to admit what you don't know, and being willing to admit that you have something to learn, or being willing to ask the question and not knowing the answer, which I don't love. I like to know the answer when I ask a question, but there's far smarter people in the room, and I'm just here to support them and give them the space to do what they need to do.
So Megan, in the 20 years that you've been in the industry, I'm sure you've seen many changes happening. Even the first park you worked at has changed owners multiple times, since you joined the industry. Technology has changed, visitor expectations have changed. What hasn't changed?
People. I think in terms of, change is inevitable, growth is optional. I think we've probably all heard that at some point or another. But what people are looking for is an escape. They're looking for something to share with their friends or their family. Here at the park, it's grandparents and parents wanting to give their kids or grandkids the same experience that they had growing up. They're bringing them back to this ride that has been here since 1963 and saying, this was my first ride. I want it to be your first ride. So that doesn't change. That feeling, that wonder, that excitement about having somewhere to escape to, or if it's a family that can't afford a larger vacation, this is their vacation, so they want it to be as special as possible. And I think the guests haven't changed that much. I mean, of course, they want the brand new giant coaster. They want the new greatest show and the drones and all of those things. But they're also perfectly happy with the sand pit to dig in. And I think in terms of our team members, one of the things I was taught early in my career, there's four things you don't mess up: their safety, their paychecks, and their schedules. I'm sorry. Nope, there were three. I was right. Going back to the three: safety, paychecks, and schedules. They value their time. They want to make sure that we do too. No one works just because, hey, this is something I'm doing out of the goodness of my heart. We need to make sure that they're able to support the things that they want to support, and no one should feel unsafe when they come to work. It's just basic respect for a human being there. So I think as long as you take care of those things, everything else you can fall into place.
That's awesome and so well said. And Megan, I was going to ask you about the best advice you've gotten, but it sounds like you kind of shared some of that along the way. But so I'll go ahead and ask, and if you have other advice that you've gotten, you could share. But also, if you have advice for others now that you're as experienced as you are in the industry. So either or.
So I've touched on quite a few different things and quite a few different leaders. Yeah, I think I don't think it's just one piece of information that you meet this, one leader one time and they say this thing and it sticks with you forever. It's the exposure to those leaders, the exposure to someone that you respect over a period of time. And just the picking up of little pieces, or, oh, that's really good, and something that changes your perspective and makes you feel comfortable in the uncomfortable. But I will say something that I've heard my entire life, and I think is relevant in everything that you do is, and my dad would say this to me, whether we were sitting around the dinner table or right before I left the house, now he passed a couple of years ago, but we now kind of joke about it, like, life is all about choices. And he would say that and not really expand upon it. So it was just kind of like left there sitting with you. But as we'd walk out the door, it was make good choices. Again, there's no like, here's what happens if you don't. But I think in terms of your career, or is what type of person you are, what type of leader you are, it's all about choices. And you will get it wrong sometimes. You will mess it up, but okay, then you need to make the choice to acknowledge that and apologize and make amends for the person that you didn't lead in the right way. And again, you may get that wrong, but just, okay, you have an option. There is a choice here. You can change it for the better, or you can change it for the worse, but that change is going to happen and it's your choice. So just make the best choice you have with what you have in front of you.
Well said. Megan, this has been such a fascinating conversation. We really appreciate the opportunity to get to chat with you today. As we start to wind this down here, if people want to learn more about Dutch Wonderland, or if they want to get a hold of you directly, where would you send them?
Honestly, I'll give them my email. I would love to hear from anyone. It's just megan.hartman@palaceentertainment.com. And that would be the best way to reach out, and I can share anything that I've learned, or if somebody would like to fact check us on the pretzel information, I would also love to receive that. So please reach out and let me know.
We also would love that fact checking, just to make sure we're giving out the best possible information about pretzels here on the Attraction Pros podcast. But Megan, as Josh said, it was a fascinating conversation. So great to see you again and to catch up. And for everybody out there who's watching and listening, just remember, we are all Attraction Pros.